So, good evening, one and all, and good evening to Professor Guru. And as we all know that we are doing a course on Western political thought, and we are dealing with political thought of Plato. So far, we have covered, you know, three contents. Introducing Plato in the first or maybe second lecture. In the third lecture, it was all about the human nature. Then in the fourth lecture, it was all about origin, nature of the state, evolution of the state. And today, the speaker will speak on the concept of philosopher king, especially why the philosopher should be the king and why the king should be the philosopher. So, uh, let's understand the concept of philosopher king. I think we all know that, but let's discover what we don't know on what we know, right? So let's add to our knowledge by listening to Professor Guru, and at the same time, I urge all of you to listen him carefully and critically engage with his deliberation, so that you can be able to ask the right question at the end of the deliberation. So with this, I am welcoming Professor Guru, and I request him to start his deliberation on this concept of philosopher king. Yes, sir. Now you can continue.
Yes. My dear students, I welcome back you to my class. I consider it as a classroom, web classroom. And specifically, I am discussing on political thought of different thinkers, starting with Plato, for the benefit of the students of my department. Though in the process, other students who are interested to listen to it may be benefited. I hope that the listeners and the students who listen to the discussions may be benefited by my discussions and deliberations, specifically in the process of formation of clarity of understanding concerning the political thought of Plato, as well as the different major aspects or dimensions of Plato's political thought. I hope that on listening to the discussions and deliberations, probably you'll be able to remove your difficulties in understanding the logic of Plato when he conceptualizes on state and state individual relationship and designs a model state of his own vision, what is termed as or called as the Republic. So far as today's topic of discussion is concerned, I would like to discuss with you and deliberate on Plato's concept of philosopher king. This concept of philosopher king of Plato is of tremendous importance. It carries special significance in Plato's political thought, specifically in the context of his vision of the model state, the Republic. And what is its distinctiveness? What is its importance? Because it is this concept through which Plato conveys us his vision of a ruler, his vision of the government, the structure of the government, the functions of the government, the style of governance, the content of governance, as well as the pattern of relationship between the government and the governed, the ruler and the ruled, the state and the people. So it epitomizes the central aspect of Plato's political thought concerning his model state, because this concept is exclusively concerned with government and governance. This aspect, Plato's concept of philosopher king, is no doubt a major aspect or dimensions of Plato's political thought. But at the same time, there are other three major aspects. Specifically, his concept and scheme of communism, his concept and scheme of education, and his concept and scheme of justice. So these are in total, these are the three major aspects or dimensions of Plato's ideal state, the republic. These are the three major aspects which students of political science are expected to be aware of and to have a clarity of understanding concerning the logic of Plato, the philosophical logic of Plato, in forming his model state, the republic. But these concepts, his concept of philosopher king, his concept of communism, concept of education, concept of justice, all these concepts are the derivative concepts, as I've already told you. These are the derivative concepts because these concepts are derived of Plato from his basic assumption on human nature. Therefore, for understanding these concepts of Plato, whether it is the concept of philosopher king or concept of communism, concept of education or concept of justice, for understanding each of these major aspects of Plato's political thought concerning state, it becomes imperative for us to have an understanding of his fundamental assumption, his foundational concept of human nature. Because it is his concept of human nature that bears, reflects, manifests his philosophy of life. So unless we understand the philosophy of life of the thinker on the basis of which the foundational concepts have been designed by him, and from which he derives the derivatives, the subsequent aspects, the interrelated aspects, the integrated aspects of the state of his vision, it may not be possible for us to have clarity of understanding so far as Plato's political ideas are concerned. Therefore, when I start with my perception, my discussions, my deliberations on Plato's concept of philosopher king, I would like to urge upon all the students who listen to these discussions to remember, to recollect our earlier discussions on Plato's concept of human nature. This is because it is from that concept of human nature that he derives his concept of philosopher king. And what we have discussed, so far as the concept of human nature of Plato is concerned, to repeat it again, that human nature is the manifestation of soul of the individual, soul being composed of three natural elements: reason, spirit, and appetite. These three elements are the natural elements because these are the gifts of nature. These are implanted by nature in human soul. And each of these three elements in human soul generate distinctive propensities, motivations for the individual to work, to display behavior, to perform role in accordance with the predominance element present in his soul. So each of these three elements is a natural element. This must be remembered. These are the gifts of nature. These are not learned by the individual. These are not borrowed by the individual from outside. This cannot be generated in the individual through special training or inculcation. These are the gifts of nature. Nature has given these elements in definite proportions in the soul of the individual. And these three elements are not distributed equally in the soul of every individual. Rather, there is, according to Plato, there is found unequal distribution of these three elements. one element is predominant as against the other two elements. And each element carries a distinctive qualities. And in that context, as we've already discussed earlier, the natural quality of the element of reason is right thinking. Presence of this element in the soul of the individual motivates the individual for thinking what is objectively good. So rational speculation, rational contemplation concerning a life of virtue may be obtained by an individual by the application of this element of reason. This is the tremendous importance of reason in the soul of the individual. And so far as these three elements are concerned, reason, spirit, and appetite, as we discussed earlier, reason is the topmost element of human soul. Why? Because it is the decision-making element in human soul. Presence of this element in human soul makes the individual or enables the individual, gives him the capability to decide what is objectively good. So it is the decision-making element, and therefore it is the ruling element in human soul. It is the ruling element in human body. This is the philosophical basis of a Plato's concept of philosopher king. So for understanding Plato's concept of philosopher king, we must understand the philosophical basis from which he derives and conceptualizes this concept. And the philosophical basis is the superiority of the element of reason, characterized by right thinking, the quality of right thinking. To this element, or from this element, he derives his concept of philosopher king. This is the philosophical basis. Therefore, for understanding Plato's concept of philosopher king, we have to understand the philosophical basis of this concept. And that is the reason why, as we already discussed in earlier classes, the famous statement of Ernest Walker, the philosopher king, the concept of philosopher king is not a mere addition or insertion in Plato's political thought. Plato has not borrowed it from outside. This is not an external concept. It is the logical conclusion of the whole method or process in which the construction of his ideal state has proceeded. It is a logical conclusion. Why it is a logical conclusion? Because he derives this concept from the concept of reason, from the element of reason, which is the topmost element, the supreme element in human soul, the deciding element, the ruling element. Just as the element of reason rules human body, decides for the human body. Similarly, in the society, the man of reason must rule the population. This is his philosophical argument. This is the philosophical logic of Plato. Therefore, so far as Plato's concept of philosopher king is concerned, he is of the opinion, he conceptualizes, quite in conformity with the natural endowments in the soul of the individual, that those individuals in whom the element of reason is predominant compared to the other two elements, they are naturally destined to make decisions for the society as a whole, for attainment of a life of virtue for the people of the society. And that is why, while discussing the nature of Plato's political thought in earlier class, we have noted that Plato's state ultimately is a rational organization. Why it is a rational organization? Because it is ruled, or it is expected to be ruled by the ruling class, which is composed of the men of reason only. So in the totality of the population, those individuals who have the element of reason predominant in their soul, who may therefore accordingly be termed naturally as men of reason or persons of reason, They are to constitute a class of their own, what it terms as the ruling class. And Plato wastes the function of making decision for the society as a whole. So far as making of public policies are concerned, enactment of public policies are concerned, implementation of public policies are concerned to this ruling class, which is composed of men of reason. These individuals are fit to make decisions, rational decisions, through rational contemplation, in finding out the ingredients of a life of virtue, an objectively good human life for the benefit of mankind as a whole. And these individuals are the members of this ruling class, no doubt are characterized by the predominance of the element of reason, but the member of that ruling class who has in him presence of this element of reason to the greatest extent is naturally destined to become the topmost decision maker, therefore the ruler of the state. And that is his concept of philosopher king, therefore. What is this concept of philosopher king is therefore philosopher and king taken together, mixed together. Who would become the king? Who would become the ruler? Who would become the ultimate decision maker of the society? The philosopher. And who is the philosopher? He is the man of wisdom, greatest wisdom, highest wisdom. And who would become the man of highest wisdom? The man of highest reason. This is the logic. So the man of highest reason, that is the man of highest wisdom, that is the man of highest philosophy, is made by nature, according to Plato, the man of highest political power. And this man of highest reason is philosopher king, therefore, philosopher ruler, who heads the ruling class, who is not only head of the government, but also head of the state as well. This philosopher king, who is characterized by the presence of the reason in his soul to the greatest extent, as gifted by nature, is capable of making perfectly right decisions in the context of making of public policies for attainment of a life of virtue for the people of the society as a whole. He is only capable, he says. He is naturally endowed. No one else in the society is capable of making right decisions perfectly except this man of highest reason, the man of highest philosophy, the man of highest wisdom. So, political power, the power of making societal decisions, for making public policies, implementing public policies, for attainment of a life of virtue for the people of all, is vested by Plato to this man of highest reason. So Plato's philosopher king is man of highest reason and man of highest power combined in one. And this man of highest reason, his philosopher king, his philosopher ruler, who represents the element of reason to the greatest extent in his soul, is naturally becomes selfless in his thinking, in making public policies to the highest extent. Because the natural quality of the element of reason issues forth in selflessness. This point, this logic must also be understood. In Plato's terminology, reason issues forth in selflessness. So reason, rationality and selflessness are identical. One cannot become selfless unless he has the element of reason present in him to the greatest extent. This is his logic, his assumption, Plato's assumption. So Plato's philosopher ruler, who is the man of highest reason in this society, is also the man of highest selflessness. He is not concerned about his own physical body. He is not at all concerned with material things of life. He is man of highest philosophy, man of highest reason, whom nature has intended to devote himself completely, to sacrifice his time, energy, and body, to use his body, use his thinking for the good of all, selflessly. Therefore, he is corruption free also, because he is man of highest selflessness. He cannot become corrupt because he is man of highest reason. He is man of highest selflessness. One can become corrupt only when he becomes selfish in thinking and activities. So Plato's philosopher king is man of highest reason and man of highest political power, decision-making power, combined in one. This is the philosophical basis. This is the philosophical logic of Plato's concept of philosopher king that you must understand. We may not agree with his basic assumptions, but once we agree with what he says, it becomes impossible for us to criticize Plato's concept of philosopher king. And this philosopher king, who is man of highest reason, forms a government of his own. And what is the structure of the government? Plato says it is monarchy. Because there is rule by a single man of highest reason who also enjoys and exercises highest power. The structure of government is monarchical in Plato's republic. The man, a single man having element of reason in him to the highest extent compared to rest of the population, he is naturally intended and made the king, the ruler, the decision maker of the society as a whole. So the form of government is essentially monarchy, he says. Structure of government is monarchical. And the philosopher king is assisted by other members of the ruling class in making public policies, in administering public policies or implementing public policies. But the object of making and implementing public policies is attainment of a life of virtue for all, selflessly. Therefore, the content of governance is moral, and the style of governance is selflessness. So Plato's philosopher king rules over the population of the society in Plato's society for attainment of a life of virtue for all, and he governs selflessly over the people. So content of governance is moral. Style of governance is selfless, free from corruption, free from any vested interest. And this philosopher king of Plato is the man of highest political power in Plato's state. He is the ultimate decision maker, man of highest political power. He decides, and the decisions are obeyed by rest of the population. Every member of Plato's state, whether he is a member of the military class, whether he is a member of the producing class. So every member of a Plato's state, the republic, they render unquestioning obedience to the decisions as made and implemented by the philosopher king, who in the discharge of his governing function is assisted by other members of the ruling class. So people render unquestioning obedience. And this is the basis of Plato's concept of political obligation. Why do people obey the philosopher king? Why? What is the basis of political obligation? And Plato says it is the belief of the people that the philosopher king is objectively good in thinking in his activities, in his rule and governance over the people. It is a belief in the goodness, objective goodness of the philosopher king, that in rendering such obedience to the decisions and orders and commands of the philosopher king, that the greatest good of every individual and the greatest good of all the members of the society can be attained and realized. It is because of this moral belief that the members of the society legitimize the philosopher king, accept his decisions, render unquestioning obedience. Therefore, in Plato's state, so far as the relationship between the ruler and the ruled is concerned, Plato is not at all concerned with the liberal concepts of rights and liberty or the socialist concept of equality. So far as the value of equality is concerned, it doesn't exist in Plato's state. People are not equal. Nature has not made the human beings equal in the capacities of their soul. There is natural inequality, he professes, because nature has not endowed every individual with equal amount of all these three elements. These three elements, reason, spirit, and appetite, are present in the soul of every individual in different proportions, in different quantities. Therefore, people are not equal in their propensities, in their thinking, in their activities. So nature doesn't establish, nature doesn't intend equality. So the concept, the socialist concept of equality is not found to exist in Plato's political thought. Plato is also not concerned about the liberal concept of rights and liberty. Rather, he is concerned about the concept, the moral concept of duty and duty only. Every member of his state is duty bound. He expects every member of his state to be dutiful in discharging the natural function which nature has assigned to him or her on the basis of the predominant element of his soul. So people have no rights, people have no liberty, but they are not concerned that the rights and liberty are absent there because they are duty bound, they are dutiful. They perform their occupational duties with utmost sincerity, utmost diligence, utmost faithfulness, and they contribute their share by way of performing their roles for attainment of a life of virtue for all members of the society as a whole. So Plato's philosopher king rules absolutely. He enjoys unlimited power. He's an absolute ruler. But at the same time, Plato says, his absolutism is not unqualified absolutism. Plato requires his philosopher king, the man of highest power in his state, to be bound by four prescriptions that he stipulations that he prescribes. Four stipulations. The first one is the philosopher king must not bring about any change in the size of the territory of his state. Second stipulation, the philosopher king must not bring about any change in the size of the population of his state. Third stipulation, he must not bring any change in the scheme of education in the state. He must not bring any change in the scheme of justice in the state. These are the four stipulations which must be obeyed by even the philosopher king, the man of highest power of Plato's republic. Plato doesn't allow his philosopher king to bring about any change in the size of the population and size of the territory of the state. Why? Because in his opinion, a large population and a large territory become very difficult to be governed. At the same time, every small population and a small territory is found to be insufficient, inadequate to meet the needs of the people of the society. Therefore, Plato is not in favor of a large territory, he is not in favor of a large population. Rather, he says the territory must be that much which is large enough to be well governed and small enough to be well governed at the same time. So, a medium size of territory he is in favor of. A medium size of population he is in favor of. The population must not be too large, it must not be too small. It should be that much which is necessary to make the population well governed and to use the population for production of the necessities of life and existence. At the same time, the philosopher king must not bring about a change in the scheme of education. Because the scheme of education gives special training to the citizens. So, if any change is brought about in the scheme of education, certainly the vision of Plato concerning his model state would collapse. The philosopher king at the same time is not allowed by Plato to bring in any change in the scheme of justice. Because justice is the ultimate goal of Plato's political thought, by Plato's state for attainment and realization. So, subject to these four stipulations, the power of the philosopher king in ruling over the people, in governing the population, is absolute, unlimited. So, this aspect must also be noted, so far as Plato's concept of philosopher king is concerned. So, Plato's philosopher king enjoys absolute power, unlimited power, subject to the four stipulations prescribed by Plato. Plato's philosopher king is therefore an authoritarian ruler. Why? He is an authoritarian ruler. He may be said to be an authoritarian ruler because he is the ultimate decision maker and he imposes his decisions on each and every aspect of the society upon the people. So, in Plato's state, so far as the power and position of the philosopher is concerned, it is absolute, it is also authoritarian. He is authoritarian in his relationship with the people because he imposes his decisions. He makes public policies. And in making of public policies, there is no popular participation. People are not allowed to participate in the making of public policies. This is the natural right and prerogative of the philosopher king only and exclusively. He is the ultimate decision maker, and whatever he decides, whatever public policies he makes for attainment of a life of virtue, are imposed upon the people, and people of the society, including the soldiers and the producers, they're required to render unquestioning obedience to the decisions, policies, orders, and commands of the philosopher king. He is an authoritarian ruler. At the same time, he is also a totalitarian ruler. And what do we mean by totalitarianism? Totalitarianism connotes interference in each and every aspect of life of the individual. And that is what Plato's philosopher king does in his relationship with the people in the context of making of public policies. Plato's philosopher king can encroach upon. He has that natural right, the right given by the nature, to encroach upon each and every aspect of the life of the individual. So people have no privacy. They're not even able to decide the occupation or vocation in life. Everything in their life is to be decided by Plato's philosopher king. He can encroach upon, he can touch upon, he can interfere with each and every aspect of life of each and every member of the state. And no one can question him. So Plato's philosopher king is an authoritarian ruler. Plato's philosopher king is a totalitarian ruler. And at the same time, what do we find? That Plato's philosopher king is not responsible to the people, not responsive to public opinion. He's not responsible to the people. He's not elected by the people. He's not nominated by the people. He's not appointed by the people. People have no role in the appointment of the philosopher king. Who appoints him? It is nature. So nature makes the philosopher king on the basis of the presence of the element of reason to the greatest extent in the soul of that individual. So for exercising his political power, the highest and unlimited political power which nature has invested in him, the philosopher king doesn't depend upon the people. The government of philosopher king is not based upon the consent of the governed. The members of the state have no right to protest. They do not have any rights, inalienable rights, inviolable rights. They do not have liberty. So they do not have rights and liberty. They do not have a participation in making of public policies. The philosopher king is not responsible to the people, not responsive to public opinion. And he rules absolutely over the people. Subject, of course, to the four stipulations prescribed by Plato. For attainment of only one objective, the ultimate objective of human life, that is attainment of a life of virtue, an objectively good human life for the people of the society as a whole. And he works selflessly. In ruling over the people, he has no selfish consideration. He is not at all self-centered, self-concerned, self-regarding in his thinking and activities. He is community-oriented, people-oriented. He rules for the good of the people. And at the same time, he is required by Plato to live the life of a saint. A saintly life is prescribed by Plato for philosopher king. On one hand, he enjoys absolute power. At the same time, he is required by Plato to live a life of utter renunciation, utter sacrifice. And this is evident when Plato requires his philosopher king to be deprived of private property and private family. Plato's philosopher king is not allowed by Plato to have his private family. He has no wife, no children. He cannot marry, have a family of his own. He has no private property, no private house to live in, no food, no shelter, no private food, no private shelter to live in. So he is deprived of property. He is deprived of family. Why? Why Plato deprives the philosopher king of property and family? Why? What is the logic behind it? What is the philosophic rationale of it? Plato is of the opinion that the philosopher king is the man of highest reason. And what is the natural tendency of the element of reason? It issues forth in utmost selflessness. So the man of reason must be selflessness to the greatest extent. But Plato finds that even the philosopher king, who is the man of highest reason, may find it extremely difficult to become completely selfless in his thinking and activities if he is allowed allowed possession of private property and family. Why? Property and family, these are the two great appetitive institutions. The presence of the element of appetite, even in the soul of the philosopher king, would tend to make the philosopher king corrupt. As we have already discussed, his concept of human nature, that in soul of every individual, all the three elements are present: reason, spirit, and appetite. Even in the soul of the individual, these three elements are present in different proportions. And in the soul of the philosopher king, element of reason is predominant to the greatest extent as against element of spirit and appetite. That is what we have noted. And therefore he calls the philosopher king the man of highest reason, highest wisdom, highest philosophy, and makes him the king, the ruler, the highest decision maker of the society. But it doesn't mean the element of appetite is totally absent in the soul of the philosopher king. He has a physical body which must be maintained, sustained, nourished, propagated. So the element of appetite is also present to some extent in the soul of that philosopher king, who is the man of highest reason. And the natural tendency of the element of appetite is to blemish, tarnish the element of reason. Element of appetite tends to make the individual selfish, self-centered, self-concerned, bodily concerned. Element of reason tends to make the individual selfless. So these are the two opposing tendencies which are present even in the soul of the individual, of the philosopher king. And this appetite, element of appetite, finds its greatest expression, manifestation. Its evil tendencies are manifested to the greatest extent through the institution of property and family. So, in order to make the individual, the philosopher king, selfless to the greatest extent, to think and work in conformity with that predominant element of reason which is present to the greatest extent in his soul, to make that element of reason pure and sublime, untouched by the evil influences of the element of appetite. Plato finds no way out except abolishing property and family from the life of the philosopher king. There is no other option left to Plato. That the element of appetite present in the soul of the philosopher king must be kept controlled, suppressed. Philosopher king must not come under the evil influences of the element of appetite, which is even present minuscule in his soul. It must not be allowed to grow by leaps and bounds in the soul of the philosopher king. It must not tarnish the thinking of the philosopher king, the right reason, the right thinking of the philosopher king. So, for keeping the element of reason of the philosopher king pure and sublime, to protect that element of reason for being unduly influenced by the evil influences of the element of appetite, which finds greatest manifestation in the institutional property and family, that he abolishes property and family from the life of the philosopher king and requires his philosopher king, the man of greatest power, to live a life of utter renunciation, utter sacrifice. He lives a life of sacrifice. Why? For the good of the people. He is not at all selfless. He is not tossed by the evil influences of appetite because he has no property, no family. As at present, we find in the life of Jogi and Modi in India. They are not tossed by the evil influences of money or family considerations. So the philosopher king can remain as a philosopher king, can perform his duties as men of highest reason and highest power combined in one only if he is deprived of possession of private property in family. So philosopher king of Plato lives a life of utter renunciation, utter sacrifice. He lives a life of a saint, a great saint. His natural duty is to think of what is objectively good for the people in the context of attainment of a life of virtue for all. And he is also capable of doing it because nature desires it. Nature intends it. Because nature has implanted in his soul the element of reason to the greatest extent compared to the rest of the population. Therefore, he is the only man in the society who is capable of knowing the direction, the goal, the ultimate goal of mankind, for the realization of which all human activities are to be addressed and directed. He is capable of knowing the ingredients of a life of virtue, making decisions on public policies accordingly, selflessly, for attainment of a life of virtue for all. He is utterly selfless in his thinking and activities. He is greatly saint in his thinking and activities. He is man of highest reason, man of highest power combined in one. Therefore, this philosopher king of Plato is free from selfishness and therefore he is free from corruption. There is no corruption in Plato's ideal state, no political corruption, no scandals, no scheme that you find today in contemporary societies. He is free from corruption. Plato's ideal state is free from corruption because the philosopher king of Plato, who is the head of the state and head of government, who is assisted in his governing function by the members of the ruling class, representing the element of reason, are all selfless in thinking and activities. Therefore, Plato's philosopher king, when he rules over the people of the society, society becomes corruption free. And consequently, there is established perfect harmony, civil accord, amity, brotherhood among the people, fraternity among the people. So, peace, tranquility, viability, stability, progress, development, civil harmony, social accord, all these are found to characterize Plato's ideal state, when the philosopher king rules over the population. And that is why Plato says that unless kings are philosophers, or philosophers are made the kings and princes of this world, states will never be free from evils and corruption. Until philosophers are kings and princes of the world of the spirit and power of philosophy, and political greatness and wisdom combined in one. The man of wisdom must be made the man of power. Then only society would be free from corruption. And this is a very eternal and universal statement of Plato, which is applicable to entire mankind in all time and all clime. Societies can be made free from evils and ills only when the rulers and the ruling class would become completely selfless in thinking and activities. Only when they would be men of wisdom, men of reason. And that is what Plato envisions in his ideal state. For making the society free from corruption, for making the state free from selfishness, political selfishness, he conceptualizes the institution of the philosopher king and makes him the highest ruler of the state, requires him to lead and live a saintly life. This is his philosophical argument. With this, I conclude.
So thank you, sir. Uh, I think today's lecture it was very much thought provoking. Quickly, I am also provoked by your conceptualization of philosopher king. Uh, you know, if the capability of the individual is assigned by the nature, then it is natural. It is not artificial, right? So, if individuals are guided by the appetite, then they cannot be guided by the reason, right? But what is the role
Yes.
of philosopher king? The role of philosopher king is to generate morality, virtue for the society, for the individual, and for the state. If the morality and virtue is natural, then how to understand the role of philosopher king generating morality and virtue for the state? So this is my first confusion or question. My second question is that can we say that the model of philosopher king, I mean the Plato's model of state, can we say that this is a democratic state? In a democratic state, doesn't mean that it is always by the people, it is for the people. It may not be of the people. So if the government is for the people and philosopher king, they are working towards that direction, can we say that Plato's philosopher king ultimately it will make a democratic state? And the third question, uh, I'm forgetting the third question. Now I want you to address this question first. Then in the meanwhile, I will think the third question.
Yes. The answer to your questions are inherent in the question itself. How Plato's philosopher king, your question is how Plato's philosopher king would generate virtue in the life of the people of the state. How he would make the people selfless in thinking and activities. How to make the people good and rational in their thinking and activities. No doubt, he is the man of highest reason, yes. He is assisted by the ruling class who also represent the element of reason. Because the ruling class is made up by those individuals who have the element of reason predominant in them. So the philosopher king and the members of the ruling class representing the element of reason are selfless naturally. So far as the members of the military class is concerned, they have the predominance of the element of spirit in them. And the natural tendency of the element of spirit it also issues forth in selflessness. Because they assist reason and spirit, they are friendly to one another. If you understand his logic, so far as human nature is concerned. Now the question arises, what is to be done so far as the members of the appetite class is concerned, the production class is concerned? Element of appetite is predominant in them. How to make them moral in thinking? And Plato says, because the element of appetite is predominant in them, they must devote themselves to the function of producing goods, commodities, crops, and grains of various types and kinds for meeting the material needs of mankind. Yes. Because of the presence of the predominance of the element of spirit appetite in them, they would tend to become selfish in their thinking and activities. But how to make them moral in the quest for attainment of a life of virtue for all? And what Plato says, that each and every member of the producing class must obey the philosopher king. Whatever decisions are made by the philosopher king are to be obeyed by each and every member of the society, including the members of the producing class, including the members of the military class. They cannot question. So they cannot question, they cannot disobey, they cannot revolt.
Sir, are they obeying out of their own conscience, or they are just obeying
Yes,
because it
that is
is
yes, that is the basis of political obligation.
conscience?
Yes, they obey. Why do they obey? Because of a belief, an intrinsic belief in the goodness of the philosopher king and the members of the ruling class. That whatever the philosopher king decides is good for them. And what type of good? Attainment of a life of virtue. A life of
Sir,
virtue can be attained only if you keep all your three elements in right proportions. If you are capable of exercising self-control, you must control yourself. Even if you are a man of appetite, you must control your appetite and obey the philosopher king. You must not be lured by the charm of governance. You must not think of entering into the ruling class or the military class. You must exercise utmost self control with the belief that in rendering such obedience, your greatest good and also the good of all would be attained and realized.
sir, when
It
the
is
member of a appetite class is obeying the philosopher king out of his conscience or his consciousness, by the process of obeying the philosopher king, does that man of appetite inherit certain qualities of a philosopher king?
no, he doesn't inherit. But rendering obedience, he contributes his share for attainment of the greatest good for all. That is his morality. You obey and you contribute therefore. You obey for what? For attainment of a life of virtue. So you also contribute to attainment of morality in life. You also keep your appetite under control, that you must not be distracted by the evil influences of that element of appetite. You must keep your selfishness under control. So utmost self-control, what he says as temperance, must be practiced by each and every member of the society, so that the greatest good of mankind can be obtained. Maybe the contributions is like a squirrel in building the Setubandha, but they contribute. They produce for the good of all, and they render their services for the good of all.
Okay,
And
thank you,
there
sir.
lies, yes, there lies their morality. If you're good to some extent, that is also your morality. Because unless you are moral to some extent, you cannot do good to others.
Okay, so coming to the second question, can we say that this model of philosopher king in Platonic thought ultimately it leads to a kind of democratic system?
No. Plato's structure of government is monarchical. It is an enlightened monarchy. It is an enlightened monarchy where wisdom rules. Therefore, how can it be democratic in the present sense of the term? Oh, what is the
I
essence
mean,
of democracy? Participation. Participation is the heart of democracy. I'm quoting it from Gabriel Almond. If there is no participation, there is no democracy.
we understand by the people, for the people, of the people.
Yes.
So here, by the people is not there, of the people is not there, but certainly when virtue is the
Yes,
guiding
for the
principles of
people, for the
philosopher
people is
king,
there. For the
for
people
the
is
people,
there. Yes,
for,
there.
for
And
the
therefore, it
people
is
is
an
there.
enlightened monarchy. It is ruled by wisdom. It is not a autocratic anarchy, despotic anarchy. There is no despotism in Plato's state, even if the philosopher king rules supreme. Because why? He doesn't rule on the basis of appetite. He rules on the basis of reason.
And Plato was critical on democracy.
Yes,
Plato
certainly.
was a supporter of an
This is
enlightened.
this is the reason. This is the reason why he has conceptualized the concept of philosopher king because of his abhorrence, total hatred towards the then prevalent democracy. His teacher Socrates, whom he considered to be the greatest man of knowledge, was put to death by the then democratic government of Athens. Therefore, he dislikes democracy because he finds in democracy rule by ignorance and the ignorance. And that is why he felt induced to conceptualize rule by
democracy most
wisdom.
democracy most of the time, it acts like a mobocracy,
Yes,
and it happens with the Socrates. That's why Plato made this enlightened, and I mean monarchy. Okay,
enlightenment.
coming to some of the questions asked in the chat box. Uh, the first question is that, is the concept of philosopher king of Plato possible in a highly materialistic globalized world? If
Yes,
yes, how can it be possible? If not, why should we study it?
yes. You have listened to the discussion. So, what is your opinion? That is your critical estimate of Plato. That is your judgment, your perception. So, you are free to have perception. You may say it is not pragmatic, not practical. We may not follow it. Give your reasons. If you say it is good, also give your reasons.
I
So,
mean,
you are free to
there is no certain answer. I mean, what you feel that is the right answer, but you have to justify it.
justify it. Yes,
I mean,
justify
sir,
it.
I mean, the person who has asked this question, he wants to know your position on it.
My position. I shall give
Yes.
my position when I shall devote myself to discussions on the critical estimate of Plato. Not now. I have not yet completed my discussions. I
Okay.
shall have to discuss a philosopher, the concept of communism, education, then justice. Then I shall devote myself to a critical
I
estimate.
think this question will be answered in the subsequent lecture.
Yes, subsequent lessons. These
Okay.
all these are questions for critically examining Plato. So this may be answered in the subsequent classes.
As a second question is that, what are the ethical implications of philosopher king's authority? How do we ensure their actions are morally just?
Reason is given by nature to him to the greatest extent. If he is a man of reason, automatically he will become selfless in thinking and activities. So he is a moral person altogether, as decided by nature, intended by nature. So nature makes him moral by birth. So he is a
I
moral
mean,
person. How can
sir,
he
I
be
think,
immoral? Well,
sir, I
how can
think
we
the
say? Yes,
ethical implication of philosopher's king authority is his or her success in the scheme of education. So if you are naturally gifted, then you will complete all, I mean, you will pass all the elimination tests, and ultimately you will become the philosopher king, and that will be the basis of your authority. Am I
yes,
right, sir?
yes, yes,
And who will pass all the elimination tests? If the person is naturally gifted, if the person is naturally, I mean, reasoned person, then he will pass all the elimination test. If that person is naturally, spirited person, then he will pass some of the elimination test. And if the person is naturally appetite oriented person, then uh, he will, I mean, score as per his, capability. So I mean, the base of philosopher king's authority is his education and his capability of passing all the elimination tests.
not
Okay, going.
exactly base. Education is a mechanism. It is a process for identifying the presence of the predominant element in the soul of the individual.
Yes,
Yes.
if the
If
person is
reason is
gifted or
predominant,
not.
If
If
reason
the
is predominant in him, it will come out automatically through the process of education. So education doesn't contribute anything for increasing the amount of reason present in his soul. It will only
education
bring
is
out the element of reason.
education is I mean that the purpose of education is to know whether the person is having
Yes,
reason or having spirit or having appetite. It is just exposing an individual.
yes,
It is
certainly.
not to train that individual.
Yes.
Okay. So the next question is that, sir, can you please simplify the line, quote unquote, that attainment of a life of virtue in the context of Platonic idea? Can we say that it is all about good human life?
What do you mean by good human life? I've already explained you in earlier classes. Probably you have not listened to. What is objective goodness? What is a life of virtue? Life of virtue is a life of objective human goodness. And what is that objective goodness? Goodness is different from subjective goodness. Subjective goodness pertains to the physical body, well-being of this physical body only. As objective goodness pertains to the goodness of your soul, because soul is the ruling element in the body of the individual. It rules, it decides, it is the highest element, it is the human element in the soul, in the body of the individual. So, what is objective goodness? Goodness which is eternal, which is universal, which is permanent, which is inalienable, which is indestructible, which is not subject to change or flux, which is valid for all time and clime. This is objective goodness. And what are the ingredients of an objective goodness? You have to find it through rational contemplation. Therefore, knowledge is virtue. Virtue is objective goodness of human life, and that can be known through rational contemplation, rational speculation, rational thinking. So you can know it, provided the element of reason is present in your soul to the greatest extent. Otherwise, you cannot. And that is why the decision making power is giving to the man of highest reason, the philosopher king. This is the logic of Plato.
Okay, coming to the next question. What is the oath of a administration which imposes on the people against their voice and choice? Is
Yes.
this model applicable to the modern populated and big countries?
Yes. What is your opinion? You form an opinion of your own. That is your assessment of Plato's concept. An estimate, an estimation, a critical analysis of his concepts. That is your
I
view.
mean, okay, I mean, my position is that if I am, utterly guided by my selfless, interest, or there is no selfishness in me, if I'm guided by the virtue, and if I'm working for the people, should I be bothered about, by the people and of the people? For example, if you will crack civil service and if you become a collector, then in the training center, you are taught not to mix with ordinary person, because if you behave like ordinary person, then you cannot work for ordinary person. So working for people, I think it is much more important than thinking about working with people or work by
Yes.
the people or of the people. I mean, we need to think about for than by or of. Okay, going to the next question. Why people followed Philosopher King without any question? Because the
Why?
Philosopher King can do
Yes.
no
Why?
wrong because he is guided by the
Why?
morality.
Yes, so understand his concept, the rational argument, the logic of Plato, then you can understand. That is what I'm insisting always. That you must understand his concept of human nature and the interrelationship between these three elements, reason, spirit, and appetite. And then you can raise questions. If you
Yes,
do
sir,
not find,
I have a question, just striked in my mind. Is there one philosopher king or queen, or there are many philosopher king and queen?
no, only one, that is monarchy. Only one. Man of highest reason. He is man of
And
highest wisdom. Yes.
the second man having the reason. right?
Mm.
So he's not the
Mm.
highest,
No,
right?
no, not highest, not highest. He is a
No,
member of the ruling class, certainly, important member.
an important member of the ruling class.
Yes,
So as an
yes.
important member of the ruling class, can that person or can that
Just like in the present situation, you may take Rajnath Singh
agree, agree,
or
agree?
your home minister.
But I think as a member of ruling class, can
Mm.
that member ask the question to the philosopher king?
No, philosopher king cannot be asked. He must be obeyed always. Whatever decisions are made by the philosopher king must be obeyed by each and every
And what
member.
is the significance of ruling members?
They assist him. They assist him in discharging the ruling functions. He is the decision maker, and whatever decisions are made are to be implemented by others. They are members of the government.
I mean, they are pious.
Yes. They are selfless. They are moral. They are duty bound.
Okay, coming to the next question. Sir, you said that these reason, spirit, and appetite are natural. It is not borrowed from anyone. Then why philosopher king need to go through the process of communism of wives, especially for gain the quality of reason?
Because why is deprived of property and family? Because Plato is afraid that the presence of this element of appetite, even to the smallest extent in his soul, may grow up and may exercise evil tendencies upon the element of reason that he represents. Therefore, to keep reason pure and sublime, to enable the philosopher king to discharge his natural function of ruling, deciding and ruling selflessly, with utmost selflessness, he must be protected from the evil influences of appetite. And that is the reason why he deprives. He abolishes property and family from the life of the philosopher king.
I
This is
mean,
the reason.
the second question she has asked is very interesting from feminism point of view. I mean, she's asking, she's our student only. I'm not taking her
Mhm.
name.
Mhm.
Sir Plato also talked about philosopher queen. Then why he has not talked about communism of husband? And can we say that he just merely talked about education for women? Can we say that he just
You can get answer from for your question only when listen to our discussions in next class on communism and education.
we will see whether
Yes,
why what does it I mean what does it mean by
yes,
communism of wives?
communism. Yes.
Right. I mean, a interrelated question came to my mind.
Mhm.
Suppose a philosopher king is always guided by the reason, but he also has the appetite, sexual desire, like this thing, right? So communism of wife doesn't mean that the philosopher king or queen they will be deprived from their sexual desire,
Yes.
right? So I mean, the child will not know. I mean, there will be mating, but the child cannot know who is their father and mother. The state will take care of everything. But certainly, philosopher king and queen they will have sexual intercourse each other. But the problem is that emotion, right? Sex is also an emotional affair. I mean, to what extent it is right for the philosopher king, I mean, by applying the reason to be away from the emotion, just, having a mechanical sexual intercourse, then
Yes.
forgetting about the child. I mean,
Yes.
to what extent it is rational for the philosopher king, sir? That was
Yes.
my
So
third
that,
question. I forget it.
yeah, that is a critical estimate of Plato. You disagree with Plato, and you are free to give your own opinion on the basis of your own experiences. It is
Okay.
not necessary that we shall agree whatever Plato says in totality. We may disagree with him, on the basis of our own perceptions, on the basis of the demand of the
I
time.
mean, in that sense, okay, it's okay
Yes.
that critical minds are there, so we think critically. It
Yes.
means that philosopher kings, from the Plato's point of view, is very much mechanical than meaningful. It's
Certainly.
a very much mechanical person.
Certainly.
Okay. So coming to the next question, sir, if the philosopher king is chosen by the nature itself, then what is the role of prescribed educational system by Plato? I mean, sir, you have just answered.
I have
The
answered it.
educational system is not to give special training to them. The educational system is there to know whether
Yes.
the person is guided by, or whether the predominant quality of that person
Yes.
is reason or spirit or appetite. So this is
Yes.
not to give training, or give values or virtues to them. It is just to know them whether they are virtuous or not.
Oh, you should not confuse between Plato's concept of education and the present scheme of education in which you are trained for jobs.
They are two
No,
different things.
they are two different things.
Okay, coming to the next question, sir. Whenever we are talking about objective good of individual, what we actually mean?
Good which is unchangeable. If anything changes, it is not objectively good, it is subjective good. Good which is
I mean,
permanent,
something permanent.
yes, eternal, valid for
Right.
all individuals, valid for all time. That is objective goodness.
Next
And what?
questions.
Yes.
Next question.
This
Whether
this is
the idea,
almost this is almost identical with the Vedantic concept. Almost
sir,
identical.
next question, sir. Whether the ideal state is ruled by philosopher king, which is single monarch, or a community of philosopher kings. I mean, you have
No.
answered.
I
It
have
will be a
already
single
answered.
monarch. It's a
Yes.
single monarch. Right. Only the community of, there is no community of philosopher king, men of ruling class, but the men of ruling class will help the philosopher king to implement all
Yes.
these rules and regulation. So the man having highest virtue, I mean, he doesn't require any advice. I mean, he knows everything. Sir, if the various elements have been inculcated by the nature inside the souls of people, then, sir, how could we find out that which element predominates in which individual?
Through
Who
Plato's
is
scheme of
there to
education.
find it? Scheme of
Yes.
education. Through scheme of education, we can understand. Uh, okay. The next question is that, sir, Plato's philosopher king are the rulers of the society, but my question is, are the philosophical knowledge and wisdom sufficient qualification for effective leadership and governance?
Yes, that is what Plato believes. You may disagree with him. We are discussing Plato's beliefs, Plato's assumptions. We are free to criticize him. We may not accept whatever he says. So if we do not find it good, we may not accept it.
Okay, so what I find from these questions is that participants are provoked, and participants, by using their critical faculty, they reacted uh, to the concluding lectures on this
Yes.
topic, right? So at the end of this Plato's political thought, at the end lecture, sir will give a critical estimation, and most of your questions are something related. I mean, these questions are supposed to be asked in that last lecture,
Yes, last lecture.
but
That is what I'm
but it,
telling from the very beginning. That you must raise questions concerning your difficulties in understanding Plato's logic. Do not ask questions on the basis of your own evaluation or estimation of Plato, because you are free to give. You are free to criticize him. You may accept him, you may not. You may bring about
okay.
changes.
In the meanwhile, another question has appeared in the chat box. Sir, the ruling principles of Plato will lead to demand for the separation because he was not in favor of big states. What is your own view? Please explain.
I shall give my views only in the concluding class, not now.
I mean, the approach what Sar is holding is that he will not disclose it because he has to keep it for the last lecture. But it is also fair in some sense. If I disclose everything here, then my what I will say in my last lecture. I mean, something must be there, so that I mean, some ingredients must be there in the last lecture. I can effectively and efficiently, say it before all of you. So that is the approach R is holding.
You
So
read Plato's ideas thoroughly and attentively so
I
that you
mean,
can form
participants,
your problems.
participants, the questions what you have asked, it doesn't mean that Sir is not having answer. Sir is having answer, but he is keeping all these answer, uh, you know, in his own mind, and he will expose it only when he will deal with the last lecture
Yes, yes,
on
yes.
Plato's political thought. So
And
we should not be confused.
again I say that my conclusion would be different from your conclusion. You may disagree with me. You are free as an intellectual, as a scholar. You are free to have your own opinion. Criticize Plato in whatever way you like, or accept him, or bring about changes in his concepts. You are free to do it as a scholar.
Okay, and another question has come. If three elements are natural and cannot bring changes in it, then why Plato was afraid of growth of appetite element in Philosopher King?
Because appetite has a natural tendency to attack the element of reason, to attack the element of spirit. It is a natural tendency because these are enemies which are present in the soul of the individual. They pull the individual in different directions. Whether you will come under the influence of appetite or not, it depends upon your willpower and your self control. That is the reason.
Okay, so that's it. I mean, wonderful. I mean, even though questions are not directly connected to the topic of discussion, but
Yes,
you all these questions proved that it was a thought-provoking question,
certainly, certainly.
and
I'm glad
and
to note it. I'm glad to note it that students are thinking on Plato, and that is the utility of Plato for students. It gives food to think, food for
My
thought.
last my last question is to you, sir. Why Aristotle is called the father of political science? Why not Plato?
Because scientific method of political study analysis commenced with Aristotle for the first time, not Plato. Plato
And
is the
Plato was
political
very much
philosopher,
philosophical.
philosophical. He has no scientific method or approach
I mean, why science becomes the basis, not philosophy?
because we are proud of science at present.
So
We
that's why
boast,
he is.
yes, we boast ourselves as a man of science. We are very much induced, very much lured by scientific inventions and discoveries.
I
If you are
mean, sir,
not
why?
scientific, if you are not scientific, the present understanding is if you are not scientific in your approach and thought, you are traditional, you are ignorant, you are
Agree.
rustic.
But sir, if a person will say me, sir, you are like Socrates. Another person will say me, you are like Plato.
It is this craze for science that has induced political scientists to rename our discipline as political science. And that is what Maitland, W.H. Maitland, he deplores. When I see a set of questions headed by the word political science, I regret not the questions but the title.
Yes, I know it. I know it. I know it. Okay, okay. But sir, without political philosophy, one cannot become the political scientist also. Knowledge of political philosophy is also, it is very crucial. If you want to be a theoretician, every theoretician is a half philosopher and half scientist. Right.
Yes,
So
certainly.
without philosophy, you cannot become a
You cannot,
theorist.
yes, you cannot ignore philosophy. It is concerned with your existence, your life, living.
So the last question has come. Students are continuously asking. One student is have asked 4 to 5 questions. Sir, we cannot say appetite as enemy these are also
Mhm.
important for the ruling of the
Enemy
state.
of
I mean,
what? Enemy of what? Enemy of reason, enemy of spirit, not enemy of this body.
no, appetite has a positive role, appetite has a negative role. Appetite
Yes,
has a positive role, it produces for the entire nation state. But appetite as a negative force, it always quarrels with the reason and it always pulls the reason to its own level, and
yes,
thereby it will bring destruction in the society and the state.
certainly. When it tends to overshadow reason and spirit, then only there is decline of the society. Man becomes corrupt. Man becomes selfish and selfish.
So thank you very much. And the number of questions what you have asked, this is this is just like a birthday cake for the speaker. All the speaker they want, uh, they want them to be asked questions. And sir,
Certain,
uh,
certain.
these web talks, it is not that students are patiently listening. Students are also understanding the relevance of the web talk. It is not that always in the classroom you can get such kind of questions, right? In the web talk, people, participants, they are sitting, they are confidently writing, they are editing, and finally they are posting it on the chat box. In the class, student may hesitate because student has to directly stand and ask. For that, the student requires a kind of courage, but here courage is not required. You can edit your
Yes,
own question
yes,
and you can
yes, yes.
ask.
That's true. But again, I insist upon the students that they must understand the philosophic logic of Plato. Then only they can either agree with him or disagree with him. There is no question of asking questions. There is no relevance of asking questions. Either you accept his basic assumption or you reject.
No, but it's okay, no problem.
But
Whatever the
you must understand the philosophical logic of Plato's but its concepts are concerned. Why? You must investigate into. Not merely what, but why he says so.
I agree, sir, but I appreciate the questions. It is because whenever student is trying to understand Plato's political philosophy, in his
Yes.
mind or in her mind, the modern state system is there. So that's
Yes.
why he is comparing and he is
Comparing.
asking the question.
No,
So that's
they should compare only when the discussions are complete. Then only they can bring about a coherence in their thought in asking questions. Otherwise, questions will be distracted from the moot
I
point.
I agree with that. But every students they have temper in them,
Yeah.
and
Yes.
we should not marginalize their temper.
Yes, yes,
So I
yes.
think they have the freedom to ask question out of the temper, and we are there to
Mhm.
check their temper and put their
Yes.
temper in the in its due place, so that
That
we
is
can address some of the question in the
that is why I
concluding.
repeatedly tell them. Repeatedly, I tell them that wait for the last discussions. Wait for the last class on the concluding class.
Okay,
Yeah.
what Sar is telling, I'm just simplifying things. What Sar is telling that all these questions must be related with your understanding of the deliberation, right? On the very concept, if there is any confusion, you ask. Don't
Yes.
ask question out of your critical estimation, because the if you ask out of the critical estimation, then you are missing the whole point, right? The point is to understand a concept. The point is to get clarity of your
Yes.
confusion in
Yes.
understanding the concept. So
Yes.
questions, we must be very careful of asking the question. It is not that asking question is a very easy task. If you add
Not at all.
what,
Not
when,
at all.
how, a
Hmm.
question can be formed. But asking a right question related to the talk, it is as difficult as answering the
Yes.
question,
Yes. That's true.
right? So thank you. We are at the last part of this event, on behalf of all, on behalf of the department, I am
Yes.
thankful to Professor Guru. At the same time, I urge from him to know that what he will discuss in the next class coming Monday.
Coming Monday, I shall discuss on Plato's scheme of communism and scheme of education taken together, though very briefly, because of shortage of time.
Okay. So
Because
with this,
because from 17 onwards till I reach India, I will not be able to take the classes because my entire time, 100% time, is booked by my grandchildren, my granddaughters, and the grandson. So the
I
last
mean,
part
that
of my
is,
stay,
sir, that is something related to appetite or reason, sir.
not a reason, that is appetite.
That is appetite. Okay.
Yes.
And we have to do that. We
Yes,
have to
yes,
sustain our body. When I'm saying we have to sustain our body, we have to sustain the grandchildren, because they are also part of our body. And
yes,
all these are we in future, right? My
yes, yes,
grandchildren is me, and that is in future only.
yes.
So thank you, and good night from
Thank you.
India.
Thank you.
And for you, good morning, sir.
Good morning. Thank you.